and nothing but the truth.
I do so swear, Madam Chair.
Okay. Mr. Vani?
As the Commission pleases. Mr. Schmidt, thanks for taking time out your schedule to be with us this morning. I understand that you've made out certain affidavits, two in particular, which we'd like to place on the record and get you to confirm. We will start with the affidavit that you made for the purposes of this Commission, which is dated 7th November 2025. Commissioners, that affidavit is in Bundle 8, which I hope is before the Commissioners, and it's at pages 104 to 107. Mr. Schmidt, do you confirm that this is your affidavit which you made out?
Sorry, I'm just attempting to find that.
It will be at the very back of your bundle at page 104.
I seem to not have, oh, there's a 104. Sorry, I'm not finding this.
With the leave of the Commission, can we assist Mr. Schmidt to find his
Yes, you
affidavit?
may.
The page is not. Oh, right. Okay. Yes. Sorry, Madam Chair.
So it's a two-page affidavit with one annex.
I confirm this is my affidavit.
And in that affidavit, you also confirmed that the contents of the founding affidavit of Lukanyo Calata, dated 17 January 2025, in the matter of Calata and others versus Government of South Africa and others, case number 5245 of 2025, that you confirm the content insofar as they pertain to you.
I confirm those contents.
And you also made reference to your confirmatory affidavit in that matter, dated 22 November 2024, which included extracts from your book, Death Flight. You confirmed that affidavit?
I confirm that affidavit.
So, Madam Chair, the certified copy of that confirmatory affidavit is in the bundle, pages 1, 2, 3. Mr. Calata's founding affidavit, that's in bundle 1, which we'll also make reference to today. And then we also have certain extracts of Mr. Schmidt's book, Death Flight, Apartheid Secret, Doctrine of Disappearance. There's certain extracts from that book at pages 4 to 103. Commissioners, Mr. Schmidt has provided us with a copy of his curriculum vitae, which we'd like to hand up copies to the Commission, and we'd like to include those in Bundle 8 as Item 4. And with the leave of the Commission, we'd like to provide copies of the CV of Mr. Schmidt.
Yes, you may hand them up.
And we will emailed digital versions of the CV to the Commission and the parties. Mr. Smith, before we commence with your evidence, can you take us through your career and perhaps offer some highlights of the work you've done over the years?
Yes, no problem. I've been a journalist for 37 years now. Started out at the Natal Mercury, as it was back then, which was independently owned, initially as a court reporter, and then moved on to establish what is now the Saturday newspaper in Durban, and then moved across to Sunday Times, Durban Bureau. Eventually rose to become a bureau chief for Sunday Times, and then left in about 2004, and 2003, joined This Day, which was the brief Nigerian-owned daily in Johannesburg. I was defense correspondent there. I went on into thereafter, after the collapse of This Day, joined independent newspapers again, and was group special investigative writer, one of three for the independent newspapers group, and was offered the post of Africa correspondent for the group, but unfortunately that post was frozen, so I left journalism per se, went into journalism training with Paula Frey's Frey Intermedia, initially as chief trainer, then became managing director. In 2010, suffered meningitis and broke my spine in 5 places, so that took me out of action for a little bit, but bounced back and was appointed executive director of the Institute for the Advancement of Journalism, where I served for 4 years, and then ever since then have been an independent consultant. I founded the Professional Journalists Association in 2010, and I still serve as its administrative secretary. That was a replacement for the South African Union of Journalists, which had died about 3 years previously. And I've also moved into a lot of human rights work, working right across the world, particularly in access to healthcare across Africa and in artistic freedoms around the globe. And I'd conduct journalism training, which I've done everywhere from the United States through Egypt, through Bangladesh, right into Solomon Islands in the South Pacific. And started writing books in 2009, and I have 6 published so far, Death Flight being my last published book.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Commissioners, we will be focusing on a section of the Calata affidavit in Bundle 1 under the heading, "Was there a political agreement not to prosecute?" And that's at paginated page 144 from paragraph 370 onwards. And, Mr. Schmidt, I understand that you also have a copy of that section
I do, yes.
of the Calata founding affidavit. So, Mr. Schmidt, there have been information or allegations that there was some kind of agreement between members of the ANC government and former generals and former National Party politicians that prosecutions of apartheid-era crimes be avoided. So, for example, at paragraph 371 in that Calata affidavit, Mr. G. Hendricks of the Al Jama'a Party put a question to the Minister of Justice on 10 November 2020. And he asked for the reasons why no perpetrators of apartheid-era killings of leaders such as Imam Harun, Steve Biko, Suleiman Babla Salaji, and hundreds of others have been prosecuted. And in particular, he asked whether there was any agreement, secret or otherwise, and if so, was the agreement legal or political? And the then Minister of Justice replied as follows: the NPA is unaware of such an agreement. At that time, before you had commenced your research for your book, Death Flight, were you aware of such allegations of an arrangement or an agreement not to prosecute the TRC cases?
I was not, in fact, aware of this. I had done some reporting on the TRC when it was sitting in Durban, but I wasn't following it around the country as some journalists like Angie Krach and others were. So this was quite peripheral to my daily grind, if you will.
And then at paragraph 372, on the 5th of July 2021, the FW de Klerk Foundation released an editorial titled "The NPA's Decision to Prosecute Apartheid-Era Crimes." And by this time, a great deal of pressure had been brought to bear on the NPA to proceed with investigations and prosecutions of these crimes. And so this was a reaction by the FW de Klerk Foundation. And in that editorial, it made reference to an informal agreement not to prosecute such crimes. And I quote, "Because of an informal agreement between the ANC leadership and former operatives of the pre-1994 government, the NPA suspended its prosecutions of apartheid-era crimes." Did you recall seeing that editorial? And if so, or perhaps with hindsight, what is your reaction to it?
No, I did not see that editorial at the time. However, what I do find interesting is this notion of an agreement. It has been bandied about, as you're probably aware, in the public for some time, that there was a deal, a secret deal struck between the generals and the apartheid cabinet. But it seems that no actual deal was struck. I see that, interestingly, the FW de Klerk Foundation mentions an informal agreement. I'm of the opinion that no actual agreement was ever struck, no actual deal was ever struck, but that there was an intensive project to try and achieve a deal that was to be legislated, in fact. But we will get to that later.
All right, then let's proceed down that road. And if you can turn to the next page, there's a heading in the Calata affidavit titled "Deliberations on a Further Immunity." And one of the earliest signs of and attempts to engineer an immunity or amnesty emerged in a SAPA press release dated 14th July 1998, where former SADF generals called for a blanket amnesty. Commissioners, that press release is at FA 54, and That's in Bundle 1 at page 677. Were you aware that by the middle of 1998, SADF generals had publicly began to call for a blanket amnesty on all sides?
This, in fact, I was aware of. And that is because in my book, in which I was essentially researching a small unit that had, over a 7-year period, 8-year period, conducted a series of death flights, killing and disposing of the bodies of anti-apartheid detainees in the oceans from light aircraft. I wanted to figure out what had happened subsequently to these perpetrators. So I was aware that the generals on 14th of July 1998 had issued this statement through SAPA on the desire for a general amnesty. Now, what's interesting about that is that in Southwest Africa, as it was then, the Administrator General, Louis Pienaar, had initially granted a blanket amnesty to all SWAPO returnees so as to allow them to participate in the first democratic elections. This led to a lot of disgruntlement among security forces who felt they deserved a similar blanket amnesty, and this was in fact granted to them. So it seemed like the generals relating to other crimes committed by their forces in South Africa and elsewhere were wanting a similar blanket amnesty. And it was on this basis that I tried to trace the generals to see what their position was on this, particularly in the light of the fact that no subsequent prosecutions against their other than the actual trial of the generals, which had Magnus Milan and others, which had concluded in 1996, had in fact proceeded.
So, Mr. Schmidt, it appears that at least on the part of the former SADF generals, they had been awarded a general immunity for actions taken in the war against SWAPO in Southwest Africa.
Indeed.
And so are you essentially saying that they anticipated or had some kind of expectation that they would be afforded a similar indemnity for any crimes committed against those resisting apartheid in South Africa?
Yes, Madam Chair, I think this expectation on behalf of the generals was quite clear.
And then if we turn to the next year, and in the Calata affidavit at paragraph 377, in March of 1999, the Truth Commission denied the amnesty applications of 37 ANC leaders. One of them included Deputy President Mbeki, and that was because that application didn't disclose any individual offences. But then at 377.2, there is a news article attached as FA 56, which is at page 680 of the bundle, where Mbeki informed Parliament that government was considering further amnesty proposals that had been put forward by the SADF generals. Was that proposal for the general or blanket amnesty that the generals had been seeking previously?
Sorry, could you restate the question?
So Mbeki later in 1999, Mbeki informs Parliament that government was considering proposals for an amnesty that had been put forward by the SADF generals. Do you know whether that proposal was in fact a request for a general or blanket amnesty?
According to my research, the quest for a blanket amnesty remained the lodestone that the generals were pursuing.
And then in the very next paragraph, and in the same article, it emerges that Mbeki was looking at the possibility of amending the Truth Commission law to allow for amnesty for collective responsibility without the need for individual disclosure. And according to the ANC spokesperson in a SAPA press release of 22 May 1999, that's Annex FA 57, which is at page 683 of Bundle 1, the generals promised to come clean if they were guaranteed amnesty. So in your research, did you ever come across an indication from the generals that they would come clean about offences that they had been involved in if they were guaranteed this general amnesty?
Well, this became apparent only in later research. I wasn't aware of this particular news story at the time, but as I said, clearly the guiding principle of the journalists, of the generals engaging in these talks, as subsequently became apparent to me, was to secure a blanket amnesty. Sorry, I don't know if I answered your question.
Yes, no, that suffices. Now let's turn to the book you have written, which is titled Death Flight, Apartheid's Secret Doctrine of Disappearance. Commissioners, in the Schmidt bundle, we have extracts from this book. Mr. Schmidt has kindly given us one copy of the book, which we would like to hand up to the commissioners.
You may hand it up.
But the different extracts are in Bundle 8 between pages 4 to 103. Before we start looking...
Madam Chair, can I interrupt? My apologies. I assume we're going to be favored with the book too.
You may buy it, Ms. Moroka.
That doesn't make any sense, if I may. I don't have the money to buy the book.
Yes, but it's for the commission. Otherwise, you have the extracts of the book in your possession.
I guess, Chair, my difficulty is that I'm going to be told this is not a trial. But if you hand up something, you hand it up and understand that everybody will have it.
Yes, Mr. Vani?
Well, the short answer to that, Commissioners, is that we do not intend to rely on the whole book. We've put up the extracts between page 4 and 103 in Bundle 8.
Yes.
Those are the extracts upon which we rely.
Yes.
And that really is the end of the matter.
So why hand up the picture?
Yes, Mr. Vani?
Well, we're simply handing up the book to illustrate that these extracts come from a published book, and as a matter of courtesy, we've handed up the whole book for the benefit of the commissioners. And dare I remind my learned friend that this is an inquisitorial inquiry. The commission is entitled to glean from whatever information is at its disposal. Ms. Morocco has access to Bundle 8 and has had access to it for
Yes.
several months.
Yes.
If she wanted a copy of the book, she's free to get to order one. There's
Yes.
nothing more that I can add.
Yes. Ms. Moroka, you've got the extracts in your possession, do you not?
Yes, I do, Chair.
Yes, thank you.
As the Commission pleases.
If I may, Chair, we reserve the right to address this issue when it comes to
Yes, you may.
So, Mr. Schmidt, can you give some background as to why you decided to write this book, Death Flight? And can you give us a high-level description of what this book is about?
The seeds of the book were sown during the trial of retired Brigadier Dr. Wouter Besson over 1999 to 2002. He was the former director of Project Coast, which was the apartheid military's chemical and biological warfare program. There was a long charge sheet proffered against him in 1999. A collection of fraud charges amounting to about 30 million, a whole bunch of other charges, and several charges related to mass murder. I've always been interested in comparative analysis and intrigued by the junta regimes in Latin America and how they related to the apartheid state. And here we found, for the first time, it was unknown at the time of the TRC, allegations that hundreds of detainees had in fact been murdered and their bodies dumped in the oceans from aircraft as part of a conspiracy conducted by agents of Project Coast or associated with Project Coast, particularly the Special Forces operatives. At the time of the trial, a lot of these gentlemen were still very active and very dangerous, working as mercenaries in Afghanistan, etc. But it played on my mind for a long time that this is certainly something that should be explored in greater detail. Wouter Besson was acquitted of all charges in 2002, as you're probably aware. The judge, however, in his findings, found that these death flights had in fact occurred. He just denied the evidence of a link between Wouter Besson, the accused, and these death flights. Besson was essentially accused of supplying the surgical drugs used to put these guys into a coma and stop their hearts. That linkage was denied, but the actual death flights were accepted by the court as having occurred. So I felt that this really needed to be properly explored, and eventually I got some funding from the Royal Norwegian Embassy via the Academic and Non-Fiction Authors Association, and proceeded to do an investigation several years later on. And this eventually resulted in the book after quite a long period of investigating, and I managed to track down the plane. I traced the plane that was used in these death flights. I used pilots' logbooks to reconstruct the death flights, and I traced the actual perpetrators and interviewed them on the record and face to face, and they admitted to basically all of these actions. So the book is not speculative, except for where I've explicitly stated that I'm speculating. I think it amounts to a small unit study, I guess, This was a secret operation that didn't even fall under one of the Recce commandos, the Recce being Special Forces. It fell directly under Special Forces headquarters. It was an entirely ring-fenced, ultra-secret operation that was conducted as if it was by civilians, using civilian clothing, civilian aircraft, civilian vehicles, operating, paid for out of a slush fund run by the military that went by the name of Vampire, and using front companies. They were initially disguised as a real estate firm, but that didn't really hold water because they had armed guards and all this sort of thing. So they reconfigured themselves as a security company. So this was taxpayers' money that was spent. By my conservative estimate, they killed and dumped something of the order of 420 people. But the primary killer, when Colonel Johan Theron retired, when I put this to him, he said that in all honesty he could not remember, but it was definitely in the hundreds.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Now, in your book, you refer extensively to an earlier book written by a German researcher by the name of Ole Bubenza, and that book is titled Post TRC Prosecutions in South Africa. Commissioners, we will be hearing from Mr. Bubenza on Friday. Extracts from his book are in bundle 7 from page 5 onwards. Now, the reference you make in your book to Mr. Bubenza's research discloses that Mr. Bubenza had spoken with some former police and army generals, including former police commissioner Johan van der Merwe. And an overview of this is set out in the Calata affidavit at paginated page 147 from paragraph 378 onwards. And according to the interview conducted with Johan van der Merwe, Mr. Bubenza indicates that the consultations included President F.W. de Klerk, Deputy President Mbeki, and that the ultimate outcome was that a general amnesty was not politically or constitutionally feasible, and therefore the organization set up by Johan van der Merwe, the Foundation for Equality Before the Law, proposed an indemnity based on the admission of the crime committed, but without the need to make full disclosure. There seems to be a parallel process where you have discussions between former police generals and the government at the time. And on the other hand, there were also discussions between former army generals and the government. Would I be correct in saying that the army generals were the group seeking a general full blanket amnesty, whereas the police generals were happy to go for an indemnity process based on the admission of crimes, but without the need to disclose details of those crimes?
That would seem to be correct. Commissioner, I find it interesting that these two processes were hermetically sealed from each other. It is my analysis that the late apartheid state was a military state and not a police state. that the police were essentially handmaidens to the military. It is interesting to me that the findings of the Truth Commission essentially acknowledged that the police had been relatively forthcoming before the Commission as compared to the military. And we see in this set of parallel negotiations, on the one hand, I believe, an attempt perhaps from the ANC side to divvy up their enemies, but from the side of the generals to make sure, particularly the military generals, to make sure that their process was sacrosanct and separated from that of their colleagues in the police, who they perceived to be rather loose-lipped.
Mr. Schmidt, on what do you base that opinion? Did you conduct any interviews?
Commissioner, I've conducted many interviews over the years, and I continue to do so with apartheid-era operatives and perpetrators, in pursuit of a current book that I'm writing on how former Minister of Defence Magnus Malan constructed a military state, transformed what was essentially a police state into a military state. I'm also working on several documentaries that relate to associated topics. And it is clear not only that there was inter-service rivalry between the police and the military, but that the military certainly held the whip hand. And that when it came to the TRC, there was definite dissatisfaction in military circles that the police had been more forthcoming than they should have been into military minds.
So it doesn't seem as if the police were successful in getting a new law or amendments to an existing law passed in relation to this individual disclosure, which seemed to be loosely based on the TRC process. But as far as you're aware, did it emerge in later initiatives taken by the government?
Well, as subsequently became evident, and we will obviously go through the actual talks process, but subsequent to the talks failing, it was apparent that a facsimile of the intended outcome, certainly on the police side, was effected in a change to the National Prosecuting Authority's rules of engagement, and that an additional amnesty process was brought into being. That was then later, subsequently in 2008, if I recall correctly, shot down as illegitimate.
Yes, that was in the High Court. And then around that time, there was an additional initiative launched by President Mbeki, known as the Special Dispensation on Political Pardons, which again required applicants for a political pardon to approach a reference group to disclose details of their crimes. But there is evidence to show that full disclosure was not an element of that process. Were you aware of that?
I'm aware of that, yes.
So let's then turn to the actual research and interviews that you carried out. An overview of your research as reflected in your book is set out in the Calata affidavit from paragraph 382 onwards. And you mentioned that you had an interview on the 21st of December 2019 with a Major General Dirk Moreira in Hartbeespoort. You state that he was a former Deputy Chief of the Army and the convener of the SADF Contact Bureau. Can you just explain or describe Dirk Moreira, the role that he had played in the SADF, and also can you explain what this Contact Bureau was about?
Yes, let me first explain how I came to Dirk Moreira in the first place. In pursuit of attempting to understand what the General's perspective was many years later, knowing now that none of their guys had essentially gone to jail for crimes committed during the apartheid era, I wanted some sort of comment from the top generals, and in particular General Constant Viljoen. I, through my contact network, got in touch with a Major General, Henny Roux. Now, Henny Roux was the former Chief of Intelligence for the Army, so former Chief Intelligence Army. He said to me that at that point, this was mid-2019, he said to me that General Constant Viljoen was at that point elderly and quite ill, in particular suffering from dementia, and would probably not be up to an interview. So I said to General Roux, well, in that case, if I could send you 3 questions, and if he is at a point of clarity, just 3 very simple questions, if he would be so kind as to answer these, I would certainly appreciate it, because General Roux had indicated that General Viljoen sort of faded in and out of clarity. When General Roux received my 3 questions, which were essentially based around what the response was of the General Corps to the General Staff to the lack of further prosecutions against their fellows, against their peers and subordinates, he got back to me and he said, this was by email, and he said, oh, you mean the talks with the ANC? And I was in fact unaware that there had been talks, as I'd indicated earlier. So that took me by surprise. And I said, absolutely, yes, sure. And he said, well, in that case, you need to speak to Major General Dirk Moreira. I subsequently realized that Dirk Moreira had been the convener of an entity called the SADF Contact Bureau. And the Contact Bureau was essentially established in around '96 to coordinate the SADF's response to the Truth Commission. In other words, to come up with a central point of coordination by the military, the former military chiefs and their subordinates to the Truth Commission. This would include, I guess, subordinates approaching the Contact Bureau and saying, look, I've been subpoenaed to testify, I'm worried, can you give me some legal guidance, etc. on this? I believe the Foundation for Equality Before the Law was associated with this Contact Bureau, but the Contact Bureau itself was a purely military affair. It seems that this Contact Bureau was responsible for narrowing the framework of what military officers were prepared to say before the Truth Commission. And we see this particularly in the when many of the top generals did appear before the commission in Cape Town, if I recall correctly, 8th of October 1998, in which certain of their statements successfully telescoped very complex processes that involved a lot of killing into seemingly anodyne and innocent and rather brief processes. That particularly relates to the death flights. There was one sole mention of this entity that I investigated in the death flight book, and it was by the generals at that hearing, and it was never fully explored at all. So this narrowing of the narrative was, I think, the one of the tactical objectives of the Contact Bureau. Nevertheless, I called up Major General Dirk Morais, and he asked me to send him a request by email, which I did. Sent him my CV, sent him my requests, and he said, well, in that case, come up and meet me at my home just outside Hartbeespoort. And I did so with two colleagues of mine, a photographer and a producer, because I am looking at doing a documentary version of the book. And while he was not prepared to go on camera, he was prepared to go on to be recorded. And I recorded this interview with him.
Thank you. So you're still in possession of the audio tape of that interview?
I am, yes, and I have shared it with the Foundation for Human Rights as well.
And you'd also be happy to share it with this Commission of Inquiry?
Absolutely, yeah.
Commissioners, if you would like an audio version of that interview,
Yes.
we would make it available. We will do so.
It is perhaps important to state at this point that subsequent to the publication of my book, and also in subsequent interviews, General Morais confirmed his statements in the interview, and he stood by the version as carried in my book.
Thank you. We must bring to the attention of the Commission that unfortunately Major General Dirk Morais, we attempted to trace him, and we discovered that he died very recently, just last month at the age of 93. And the reports we have is that he died between the 10th and 13th of January. And indeed, Commissioners, we have attempted also to locate the other generals referred to in the evidence of Mr. Schmidt, and we have prepared a schedule just to indicate the dates of death of the different generals, and with the leave of the Commission, we'd like to hand this up. It'll go into bundle 8, and it'll be item 5.
Yes, you may hand it up.
The Commissioners will see from this schedule that aside from Major General Morais, SADF General Jan Geldenhuys died on the 10th of September 2018 at the age of 83. Former Chief of the SADF General Constant Viljoen died on 3rd April 2020 at the age of 86. Defence Minister General Magnus Malan died on 18 July 2011 at the age of 81. Army General Kurt Liebenberg died on 23rd May 1998 at the age of 60. Surgeon General Daniel Peter Neilbull died on 22 July 2021 at the age of 84. The only person involved in these different talks who we believe is still alive is one Jürgen Kogel, and a Rule 3.3 notice has been issued against him. That was on the 22nd of October 2025. As far as we know, he hasn't complied with that notice, and in due course we would like to see Mr. Kogel before this commission, if needs be, under subpoena. While we're on Mr. Jürgen Kogel, can you describe who he was and what role he played?
I believe his origin is as a Namibian businessman who is associated with Thabo Mbeki. I believe that Thabo Mbeki stayed in his flat on his return from exile. I did attempt to contact Mr. Kogel, but a lot of his businesses as listed had defunct phone numbers. He was not present at the residence where he was listed. He was essentially nowhere to be found. I did manage, however, to get a message through to him via one of the ANC leaders, and he refused to speak to me.
Thank you. And while we're on Mr. Kogel, can I ask you to read an extract from your book into the record? And I'm actually going to ask you to go to the extracts of your book in your bundle, and it's on paginated page 42.
All right.
And can you read the two paragraphs, and if you could start in the second paragraph on that page, which is page 265 of your book, in the chapter titled Shadow Boxing, the Trial of the Generals. If you could read the two paragraphs starting with the line, "But there was another crucial impetus for the ANC."
But there was another crucial impetus for the ANC's initiating what became a 7-year secret negotiations process. From the outset, President Mandela's objective, as expressed by his team leaders, Thabo Mbeki, in his capacities both as Deputy President of the country and ANC President from 1997 onwards, and Jürgen Kogel, the ANC's government's convener, was explicitly a quid pro quo. In Moret's words, and this is Major General Dirk Moret, they don't want us to be charged, and they don't want them to be charged. Or as Moret later claimed were Mbeki's words, I don't want my president to be charged in court. He explained, however, that Mbeki had not meant this in the specific, as in President Nelson Mandela, but rather in the generic, and that he did not want to see any ANC state president facing charges. It is a curious aspect of the negotiations that Moret's opposite member, businessman Jürgen Kogel, hailed from Southwest Africa, the territory in which South Africa's armed forces had spilled the most blood, and which Operation Duel, that is the death flights operation, had performed the bulk of its grisly disposal work. When Mbeki returned from exile, he stayed in Kogel's apartment.
So the allegation made by Major General Moret that Mbeki said they don't want us to be charged and they don't want them to be charged. What is your takeaway from that particular statement?
The idea that that perpetrators on both sides of the line should get equal treatment in this search for a blanket amnesty. That, in other words, nobody on any side would in fact face charges, whether it was APLA, AVIA, BEER, but in particular, of course, ANC and apartheid security forces.
Yes, please remind me of the date again, the dates when this would have happened,
Sorry, the dates when?
when these words were exchanged. They don't want us to be charged.
This would have been during the talks between the generals and the cherry-picked group of ANC cabinet ministers. Thus, somewhere between 1998 and February 2003.
And then can I ask you to continue reading from the next paragraph, starting a letter written by Marais.
A letter written by Marais to then Deputy President Jacob Zuma in early 2004 for the signature of the former chiefs of the SADF recalled the initiation of the lengthy process of secret high-level talks. Quote, a process of communicating between the ANC initially and the government lately with the former chiefs of the ANC Defence Force was initiated by the Deputy President of South Africa, Mr. T. Mbeki, when he approached General C.L. Viljoen. And I'm speculating that that is somewhere around late 1996. This is after the collapse of the Government of National Unity. General Viljoen, after consultation with former chiefs of the Defence Force within the structure of the SADF Contact Bureau, conveyed our preparedness to communicate with Mr. Mbeki in his capacity as Deputy President and President of the NEC of the ANC. A convener, Mr. J. Kirchel, apparently empowered by Mr. Mbeki, arranged for a meeting at his house in Johannesburg. And again, I'm speculating that is somewhere around early 1997.
If you can just pause there. When you were reading, you said the former chiefs of the ANC Defence Force, and I think you meant to say the SA Defence Force.
I'm just reading it from his letter. So, former chiefs of the Defence Force within the structure of the SADF contact.
No, it was just a misread because.
Oh, sorry. Did I misread?
At the bottom of page 42, it does say SA Defence Force, not ANC Defence Force.
Sorry, did I say that?
Yeah. Anyway, that's just a small correction. Can you also read the next paragraph, please?
I'm continuing with the quote. That meeting was in the form of discussions, followed by a dinner hosted by Mr. Kirchel. It was attended by Mr. Mbeki and various of his ministers, as well as the Premier of Mpumalanga, Mr. M. Poza, leader of an ANC lobby, arguing that its members be protected from prosecution, and by us, the former chiefs of the Defence Force. There was enthusiastic agreement that the commenced communication should be continued and that more meetings should follow. We, the former chiefs of the Defence Force, being aware of the Deputy President's tight work schedule, suggested that he appointed one of his ministers to represent the ANC in future deliberations. Mr. Mbeki expressed, however, the opinion that the process of communication that was mutually agreed to was so important to him that he preferred to remain the prime representative of the ANC in further deliberations. Bubenza claims that...
You can pause there. Perhaps we can just, to save time, paraphrase what you glean from Ole Bubenza's book, namely that there was further discussions between Jacob Zuma, who was the then KwaZulu-Natal Provincial Cabinet Minister. Well, I think he was at that time the head of the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal, with Defence Force Generals Viljoen and Geldenhuys. And then perhaps we can pick up your interview with Major General Morea, and that's on the next page, which is page 44 of that bundle. And perhaps you can start reading from the fourth paragraph down, which starts, Morea said that on his side at the talks.
Morea said that on his side at the talks were former Defence Minister General Magnus Malan, former chiefs of the Defence Force Generals Constant Viljoen and Jannie Geldenhuys, and former Chief of the Army General Kurt Liebenberg. Although sometimes they brought in other generals, such as former Surgeon General Neil Knobel or one of the former chiefs of the Air Force, as required. Although Morea said that no specific offences were ever discussed, Kurt Liebenberg's continuous presence suggests that he was monitoring any potential references to Special Forces Black Ops, such as Operation Duel. This is my speculation, although it was totally unknown by their ANC opposites at the time. While Knobel's intermittent presence suggests he was monitoring the ANC's limited knowledge of the Project Coast chemical and biological warfare program. On the ANC government side, Morea said Mbeki's team at the talks usually consisted of the security cluster. This would make it initially under Mandela's cabinet Minister of Defence Joe Madise, Minister of Safety and Security, that is Police, Sidney Mufamadi, and Minister of Justice Dalla Omar. Quote, many deliberations followed and mutual agreements were reached, the letter read. Morea said the discussions towards formulating a pact of forgetting, which is my term, not Morea's, took place once every few months, quote, a few times at Kirchel's house, a few times at the presidency, once in Mbeki's house, and once in Durban with Zuma, end quote, and they were all, quote, very social, end quote.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. Now, in the Calata affidavit, at paragraph 385, and that's on paginated page 150 of Bundle 1, you make reference to an email from former Minister of Intelligence Ronnie Kasrils, and you say that he emailed you on the 5th of May 2020 in relation to these talks. Why did he email you, and what did he say in that email?
I had approached him because when Jacob Zuma replaced Thabo Mbeki as president, he apparently stepped into the role as chief of the ANC team on the talks, and his ministerial team, that is the security cluster, would have rotated, and Joan Tlantla would have been replaced by Ronnie Kasrils. Kasrils responded to me that he had no knowledge of these talks. However, this was it was Morea who just called it the security cluster. He couldn't always remember exactly who had participated. For instance, he recalled one elderly member who kept on dozing off during the talks. He couldn't remember his name. I speculated it's Alfred Nzor, but I didn't put that in the book because there's no confirmation of the name. And Morea could not remember the name. So he knew his side, I should say, better than he knew the opposition side. In any case, Kasrils denied any knowledge of having been in these meetings.
So, as far as you're aware, you don't have any evidence of Mr. Ronnie Kasrils attending any of these meetings?
No, I'm prepared to accept that as true. It is quite clear that on the ANC side, it was a cherry-picked group of cabinet ministers. It is possible that the rest of the cabinet was not even made aware of these talks. This was very strictly ring-fenced, and the talks were kept very close to their chest and up their sleeve, and that only those participating were in fact party to the knowledge thereof.
Now, if we can return to your interview with Major General Morea, and if we can look at paragraph 386 of the Calata affidavit, also on paginated page 150. It's indicated that during that interview, Morea showed you an unsigned handwritten letter. Please explain what this letter was about, who it was meant to go to, who it was meant to come from.
This was a letter that he'd himself written by hand in early 2004, after the talks had essentially collapsed, to Jacob Zuma, to be typed up, and the typed version was then apparently signed by the chiefs of the Defence Force on the Contact Bureau side and sent off to Jacob Zuma. So these were essentially just the draft, handwritten draft that Morea had prepared to be typed, and essentially it was a summation of the process of the negotiations. It was a brief summary of the negotiations process, the secret negotiations process. Morea was attempting to achieve some sort of closure after the collapse of the negotiations on the 17th of February 2003, which we will get to later, by essentially asking that Jacob Zuma officially sort of close off the process, acknowledge that it had run its course.
And did Major General Morea allow you to take a copy of that letter?
He did not allow me to take a copy of it, but he did allow me to photograph it, and a copy of the photographs is available.
And indeed, Commissioners, we have attached copies of the photographs of that unsigned handwritten letter. It's annexed to the Calata affidavit as FA 61, and it's in bundle 1 at page 709. The handwritten letter is somewhat difficult to read, but we do have extracts of it in the Calata affidavit. And Mr. Schmidt, can I ask you to read into the record the first extract, which is at the bottom of that same page, beginning with a process of communicating between the ANC initially and the government.
A process of communicating between the ANC initially and the government lately with the former chiefs of the SA Defence Force was initiated by the Deputy President of South Africa, Mr. T. Mbeki, when he approached General C.L. Viljoen in 19 ? And that was in the original. It seemed he was a little unclear about the initiation date. General Viljoen, continuing with my quote, General Viljoen, after consultation with the former chiefs of the Defence Force within the structure of the SADF Contact Bureau, conveyed our preparedness to communicate with Mr. Mbeki in his capacity as Deputy President and President of the NEC of the ANC. A convener, Mr. J. Kirchel, apparently empowered by Mr. Mbeki, arranged for a meeting at his house in Johannesburg. That meeting was in the form of discussions, followed by a dinner hosted by Mr. Kirchel. It was attended by Mr. Mbeki and various of his ministers, as well as the Premier of Mpumalanga, Mr. M. Poza. And I've inserted a speculation, the leader of an ANC lobby arguing that its members be protected from prosecution, a position that Mr. Poza denied, and by us, the former chiefs of the SADF. There was enthusiastic agreement that the commenced communication should be continued and that more meetings should follow. We, the former chiefs of the SADF, being aware of the Deputy President's tight work schedule, suggested that he appoint one of his ministers to represent the ANC in future deliberations. Mr. Mbeki, however, expressed the opinion that the process of communication, which was mutually agreed to, was so important to him that he preferred to remain the prime representative of the ANC in future deliberations. Many deliberations followed and mutual agreements were reached. When Mr. Mbeki could not attend, he authorized somebody, usually a minister, and later on when he became president in 1999, you, and here he's referring to Deputy President Jacob Zuma, represented him. In execution of mutual decisions, much effort was put in by the Contact Bureau and some of your ministers to prepare papers and submissions for acceptance by the Deputy President and later on the President. And then there's a break because I've extracted a portion there. In similar fashion, we, the former chiefs of the SADF, as members of the forum, were flown to Cape Town for discussions with Ministers Maduna and Nkula, and thereafter with you on 17 February 2003, which, as I said, was the date in which the talks fell apart.
So let's just pause there. There was a reference to Matthew's Porsa in that unsigned handwritten letter, and at paragraph 387, you held a telephone call with Mr. Porsa on the 2nd of June 2020. Can you explain what that telephone call was about?
Yes, I approached Mr. Porsa through his secretary, Debbie Matthews, in 2020, asking him about his alleged participation, alleged by Major General Morea, in these talks. I battled to get hold of him initially, but then eventually he in fact called me, and in a relatively brief conversation denied that he'd been party to these talks. And in fact, Commissioners, there is a statement from Matthews Porsa, which has been placed before this Commission. It's on the TRC Commission website. It's filed under statements, and then under other parties, and then under M. Porsa. It's a statement that an affidavit that was signed on the 18th of October 2025. And it is in response to a Rule 3.3 notice that the Commission served on him. And briefly, Mr. Porsa states that he never made any efforts or attempts to suppress or stop the investigation or prosecution of the TRC cases. He also states that he has never been involved directly or indirectly in this matter, nor attended meetings arranged and mediated by Jurgen Kochel or any other person. That he never directly or indirectly supported the idea of introducing a new amnesty law. And lastly, he states, paragraph 5, I do not know who Mr. Schmidt is, nor have I ever received a call from him. I have no memory of myself talking to the alleged Schmidt on 2nd June 2020, and I do not even know who he is. Mr. Schmidt, can you respond to the statement of Mr. Porsa? And I note that in your affidavit that you filed before this Commission in November of 2025, you did address the claim of Mr. Porsa that he never had any contact with you. Yes, I do not unfortunately have telephonic records, but I do have the email records of my discussions with Debbie Matthews, and in that it does indicate that Mr. Pauza did in fact call me.
Sorry, who is Debbie Matthews?
Mr. Pauza's secretary or personal assistant.
So can you just indicate why you maintain in your statement that you did have contact with him and a member of his office?
Because it did in fact occur. If he's forgotten this, it's perhaps no surprise, a person of his busyness at his level of career, but it did in fact occur.
Okay, perhaps I can refer you to your affidavit dated 7th November 2025. It's in bundle 8 from page 104. And if you look at paragraph 8, I don't know if do you have the affidavit with you? And it again would be at the very back, the last 2 pages of the bundle.
Yes, I have it.
And perhaps you can just read into the record paragraphs 8 and 9.
I attach as MS1 a WhatsApp exchange I had with Pauza's personal secretary, Debbie Burnett. Sorry, I called her Debbie Matthews because that is what she is represented at on the WhatsApp on 31st of May 2020 at 15 hours 13 that afternoon. I informed Burnett that I was trying to get hold of Dr. Pauza for comment on my book. In the second message I sent her at 15 hours 48, I confirmed that Pauza had just called me and I'll email my questions to him through Burnett. At 17 hours 41 on 31st of May 2020, I sent a list of questions to Burnett for Pauza's response. The email delivery receipt is attached at MS2. The questions included an allegation of his involvement in an ANC lobby negotiating protection from prosecution of crimes committed during apartheid. On page 270 of Death Flight at footnote 5, I recorded that Pauza called me on 1st of June 2020, flatly stating he was not part of the alleged negotiations. He added he had passed my email on to Jürgen Kochel, the mediator and facilitator of the negotiations, who in turn said that he refused to be interviewed. I stand by the information that is recorded in Death Flight.
And then you attach the WhatsApp exchange with Debbie Matthews as
Debbie
MS1. Yes, I see that in paragraph 8 she's described as Debbie Burnett, but then if you look at the top of MS1 on WhatsApp, her name appears as Debbie Matthews.
I believe that is merely stored in my phone because she represents Matthews Pauza.
Okay, so I think we can accept that in fact her name is Debbie Burnett. And then in MS2 there's a mail delivery system email record. So then let's turn to
Mr. Varney, before you move on. Mr. Schmidt, help me understand, just coming back to that manuscript letter. You say it was sent because Mr. Murray wanted some kind of closure. And that was even though the talks had broken down, the alleged talks had broken down on the 17th of February 2003. What did he mean? What does that mean that he wanted some kind of
according to Oliver Benz's book, there had been some further contact into 2004 but these appear to be rather desultory, and it seemed that on the side of the generals they were a little concerned that things hadn't been properly tied up, that the process hadn't been properly concluded, and that they were wanting it to be signed off on and acknowledged that it had been done and that the business had been concluded.
In other words, there'd be no more of the process.
Well, presumably, I mean, it seemed like the generals had hoped that there would be a continuation, but certainly by 2004, it seems like they were left out in the cold.
Thank you.
So we will return to the Marais letter, but let me draw your attention to the ANC 51st National Conference that took place in December 2002 in Stellenbosch, and references made to this national conference at paragraph 390 of the Calata affidavit on paginated page 152. So it seems that there was discussion of guidelines for a broad national amnesty, possibly in the form of presidential pardons, or at least that discussion was scheduled. Then according to a news article, it looks like it's a SAPA release. It was attached as Annex FA 62. It's in Bundle 1 at page 712. The head of the ANC presidency, Smuts Ngonyama, said that the ANC supported the idea of introducing a new amnesty law, adding that his party was against running trials in the style of the Nuremberg trials, because this would occur at the cost of nation building. Did you recall this emerging from that national conference in 2002? And do you see a connection between what was said at that conference and the discussions that were taking place between the generals and various government leaders?
As an Africa correspondent, I report on politics outside of South Africa, so I was actually unaware of this. But there does seem to be a clear alignment between what Mr. Ngonyama is saying and the search for a broad national amnesty pursued on behalf of the generals, at least, even though I was not aware that the ANC itself was also considering something of the sort. It appears that they preferred a facsimile of the TRC amnesty process, that is amnesty on a case-by-case basis for full disclosure. So this was a surprise to me, to be honest.
Now, it does seem from your book and the Marais letter that during the course of 2002 and into early 2003, the SADF generals believed that they were on track for some kind of new legislation that would accommodate their concerns around prosecutions. I'd like you to read into the record an extract from your book, and can I ask you to go to the extracts in your bundle, that's bundle 8, to page 58 of that bundle, and there's a chapter 43 titled Re-Disappearing the Disappeared. And just let me know once you have found it.
Right, I have it.
You have it. Can I ask you to read from the top through to the next page, and you can stop on that third paragraph at the top of page 59. That was the last getting together.
While the Vote Person case was wending its way through the courts, Progress had been made by the old military chiefs and the ANC leaders in the 7-year negotiations on a legal framework for a post-TRC amnesty process. Major General Dirk Morais, the convener of the SADF Contact Bureau, recalled, quote, "Eventually there was an agreement that they would prepare legislation to grant a sort of amnesty in general, and they had a writer, a law writer in Cape Town, and when it was time they invited us to Cape Town at state expense," end quote. The date was 17th of February 2003, and a delegation of generals led by former Chief of the SADF General Jannie Geldenhuys met with Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development Penrell Mduna and Minister of Safety and Security Charles Kula. Quote, "They were very nice," Morais said. "We gathered at 7 in the morning because it was Zuma's speech at the Parliament that day. They called their writer, who was apparently a state official in the Department of Justice, I'm just inserting that, and he read to us the proposed legislation. When he finished, we said, but that's got nothing to do with us, because they said they will grant amnesty to everyone who will make a full statement, presumably of the crimes committed. So General Geldenhuys said, no, we don't need that. All our people who wanted to make statements and asked for forgiveness already went to the TRC. Our other people don't have to do that, so this means nothing to us. The whole thing collapsed there," end quote. The differences between the sides were now irreconcilable. The military chiefs wanted a new law granting a blanket amnesty with no disclosure required, but the ministers wanted a new law granting amnesty on a case-by-case basis only after full disclosure. Morais claimed that it was the ANC and not the SADF that stood to gain the most from a general amnesty and had the most to fear from any legal requirement that amnesty was dependent on full disclosure because they were in power and the stability of their rule would be threatened by prosecutions. Geldenhuys' delegation then met with Zuma in his office, as Zuma had expressed a desire to meet with him. According to Morais, they merely shared, quote, a few niceties, and then he greeted us, and then we asked Kirchel to book us directly back. That's the flight, I'm taking it. That was the last getting together. End quote.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt.
Mr. Vani, I see that we have gone past our tea adjournment.
My apologies.
Will this be a convenient time to adjourn and reconvene at 11:20?
Yes, indeed, Chairperson.
Yes.
As the Commission pleases. Do you have a sense, because I'm not sure whether it's reflected in your book, the reason why the government decided not to go down the road of a general amnesty?
Personally, I'm not sure, but it seems that they essentially wanted to, in some form, extend the TRC amnesty process. There was a level of dissatisfaction within ANC ranks that the security forces, the former security forces, had not been as forthcoming as they had hoped, and that not as many cases had been resolved at the TRC, and they were hoping that by a legislated further amnesty process on the same basis, amnesty for full disclosure on a case-by-case basis, that they would encourage recalcitrants to come forward and confess and enlighten the populace as to what had occurred. That appears to have been the ANC's general perspective, although there were clear differences of opinion within the party on this.
I want to put to you an extract from the speech Thabo Mbeki to the Joint Houses of Parliament on 12 March 2003 on the occasion of the tabling of the report of the TRC. And Commissioners, I'm referring to the extract that is reflected in the Calata affidavit, paginated page 52, paragraph 124. A full copy of that speech is annexed to that affidavit as FA21. And I'm just going to read a very short extract from the Mbeki speech to Parliament. Government is of the firm conviction that we cannot resolve this matter by setting up yet another amnesty process, which in effect would mean suspending constitutional rights of those who are at the receiving end of gross human rights violations. So essentially, then President Mbeki is saying that if they were to introduce another amnesty, that effectively would be unconstitutional. Do you think that was ultimately the reason why they couldn't go down the road of another amnesty?
I think in part it was because, in fact, the generals had withdrawn from the talks, or at least had said that their draft legislation was unacceptable to them, that they felt that perhaps they could not go the legislative route because what Mbeki is saying in public, as I said, behind closed doors within ANC circles, it was felt that this is what should have been done. But it seems like the withdrawal of the generals put them in the position where they felt like they hadn't secured the buy-in of the other side, if you will, and so the legislative route was perhaps not the route to go.
And in talking of the route to go, I see in the same chapter of your book that we have been referring to, you make reference to what transpired thereafter, including the creation and the work of the Amnesty Task Team, which ultimately resulted in the changes to the prosecution policy in relation to the TRC cases and the political pardons process. So in terms of the outcome that the generals were seeking, that was effectively secured, even if they didn't get their general amnesty in law. Would you agree with that contention?
That seems to have been the net result of the changes in particular to the national prosecuting authority processes, and of course the amnesty task team that was convened from 2004. The net result being that further prosecutions did not in fact occur.
And I don't know whether you heard the evidence of earlier witnesses in these proceedings, particularly that of Minister Thembi Simelane, the sister of the late Nokatula Simelane, and Lukanyo Calata, the son of the late Fort Calata, one of the Cradock Four, that in their cases and the TRC cases more generally, investigators were not assigned to their matters through the first decade of this century. And in some matters, for example, the Cradock Four, investigations only really commenced in earnest in 2019. What is your takeaway from the fact that the state simply didn't supply investigators for these cases and didn't seem to be extending support for these cases to proceed in those years?
Well, it obviously flies in the face of the entire rationale behind the TRC in the first place, and it is a clear insult to the memories of all who died during the apartheid era, and that is, of course, across the board. It's definitely a tragedy, and it's a miscarriage of justice. Regardless of on whose behalf people were committing these various acts and these depredations, they should have gone through due process, and that clearly did not happen.
I want you to read one last extract from your book. If I can refer you to paginated page 67 of your bundle, and that would be page 290 of your book.
I have it.
And at the bottom of that page, there's a sentence that starts with, South Africa's pact of forgetting only started to unravel. If you could read that paragraph to its conclusion on the next page.
If I may just say quickly, the concept of a pact of forgetting comes from the Spanish case in which the horrors of the Civil War of the 1930s were, by agreement in the post-Franco era in the 70s, laid to rest, and that neither side, by agreement, was sort of allowed to raise the ghosts thereof. So I've speculated that a similar pact of forgetting occurred in South Africa. I will now read. South Africa's pact of forgetting only started to unravel with the inquest ruling on 12th of October 2017 that anti-apartheid activist Ahmed Timmel had been murdered in security branch custody on 27th October 1971. The ruling has sparked public demand for apartheid-era political crimes to be prosecuted. On 5th of February 2019, former TRC Chairman Archbishop Desmond Tutu, former TRC Amnesty Committee Chairman Dumisani Sibeza, and 9 other, quote, deeply outraged, end quote, former TRC commissioners demanded that President Cyril Ramaphosa institute a commission of inquiry into the suppression of TRC prosecutions. Finally, on 26th of April...
Actually, you can pause there.
Yes, sir.
So thanks for giving us some background on the Pact of Forgetting as it applied to the Spanish Civil War. But can you elaborate a little more on South Africa's Pact of Forgetting and why you described it in such terms?
It seems that, and we can read this in Bebenza, that one of the, on the ANC's side, one of the rationales for engaging in this secret series of negotiations to suborn the very statutory process that they themselves had initiated with the TRC while it was underway was that they felt a desperate need to get on with running the country and with focusing on reconciliation. It was felt that raising the ghosts would in fact derail reconciliation in this country, which is a huge irony given the objectives of the Truth Commission.
You didn't perhaps see it as this pact of forgetting had other motivations, namely to ensure that individuals on both sides wouldn't have to face justice for what occurred in the past.
There's an interesting narrative on the side of former apartheid operatives who, as I said, in my numerous interviews, working on books and on documentaries, has illuminated, and that is that they feel that they essentially won. Because they see their enemy as essentially as having been godless communism, and that as staunch Christian nationalists, they were wanting to prevent a communist regime in South Africa. So they believe that they've won. The concept of what I call an impi of impunity is, I think, still very much present with us. As in many other countries going through transitional processes, the ancien regime has obviously attempted to make sure that its personnel does not get, in their view, persecuted. Just as the new regime feels that because its cause by its own lights was morally justified, should also not be persecuted. So there's a distinct sense, I think, on both sides that burying the past is a better way to proceed than illuminating the past.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. No further questions, Chairperson.
Thank you, Mr. Vani. Ms. Ranto, any clarificatory questions?
Good morning.
Morning, Ms. Ranto.
My sincere apologies, Commissioners. Good morning once more, Commissioners. Clarification, none at this stage.
Thank you.
Safe to just mention that, like the other witnesses, we intend to take instructions on so far as the cross-examination is concerned.
Yes. Ms. Moroka?
Chair, Kelaka Leo.
Meaning what, Ms. Moroka? Hariba Soto.
Well, I'm not a
11
sworn.
languages,
I'm not
Chair.
a sworn interpreter, but she says, and so say I.
I'm indebted to.
Thank you very much, JP, for that illumination. Mr. Siminya?
Chairperson and Commissioners,
Or Ms. Njoko?
Good morning, Commissioners. We also hold the same instructions. There's no clarification questions at this point, but we do reserve our right to cross-examine.
Yes. Ilakho lelo.
Well, I'm close, I thought that would sound very differently.
Thank you, Ms. Njoko.
Mr. Siminya?
Chair and Commissioners, I have discussed something with Mr. Vani, and I would say, with your permission, and having heard for the first time about the existence of an audio, that would want to have access to the audio, and for that reason, with your permission, can we defer our questioning of the witness?
Yes. until such time that you've heard the video, the audio.
Correct, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Vani?
Chairperson, no follow-up from our side.
Thank you. Mr. Schmidt, we want to thank you for having availed yourself to come and give evidence before this commission, which will undoubtedly assist this commission to discharge its mandate. You are excused for now. You may be recalled for cross-examination at a later stage. Do make yourself available.
I will do so, and thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Chair, my apologies, and I don't hold instructions for Mr. Mayor, but I think you've jumped him.
Yes. Oh, Mr. Nell. Mr. Nell, I didn't see you. Sorry about that.
Hoekom sit jy so stil?
May it please the Commission, I just wanted to say that perhaps I should add a bit of Afrikaans and indicate that ek het geen vrae ter opheldering. I've got no questions.
Thank you, meneer. Sorry about overlooking you, Mr. Nell. You are sitting on the extreme side, and you escaped my radar.
That's on purpose, Madam Chair.
These proceedings are adjourned until Friday morning at 9 o'clock.
Has the Commission, please?